Hello and welcome to the newest episode of Borderline Podcast Disorder. Have you had a good week last week? Have you got anything major happening in the coming days? If you do, I hope it's going well. Um, Unless you, I don't know, want to do something like evil, in which case I hope it doesn't work. But if it's good, or at least even if it's bad, but it's just not evil, bad. Yeah, I hope it goes well. Um, I've got a. I had a pretty stressful week last week, actually. Before I go into talking about like what's happening next, I had a pretty stressful week, just because of some of the jobs I've done recently. Was a bit rough, financially. Um, in the past few months, and then it kind of like showed up now, but it's okay. I'm on the path of getting out of it because I got some um again some things that have I need to be paid for, and that's gonna make it up. But yeah, it was quite stressful last week. Also, it was a bit frustrating. Loads of loads. Half of the gigs that I had booked ended up getting cancelled or postponed for various reasons, and yeah, it was a bit annoying, but it's fine. It is what it is. It happens. Not gonna be too bitter about it. Um, and then I've managed to get some other stuff to do, like last minute gig wise. Um, Came up with a new joke last week, and it kind of worked. Well, like it feels like it's going well. Just gotta practice more, and that's good. That's promising. I've got some other exciting news. I've got my first acting job. Well, at first I thought it was just an acting job, but then it turns out I've been offered actually two this in the past week, and that's pretty cool. Again, that's going to help me out. Um, Money wise, it's nothing huge, and I don't think I can talk about it, so I'm not going to tell you precisely what it is. But yeah, it's good. It was. I was quite pleased because again, I started Monday morning, or no, Monday morning was quite relaxed. I think from Tuesday, I started on Tuesday, not knowing if I'm doing a gig, and then to find out last minute that last minute, a couple hours before, um, not long before I was actually planning to like head there, to find out that the show is not happening anymore, and I was like, this is a bit frustrating. But then on later on Tuesday, I got the confirmation from the other job, from the first acting job, and then on Thursday, and now on Thursday I got an inquiry about a second one, and then I've been offered it on Friday. So hey, it could be worse. So I'm not gonna complain about it. Although I don't even know. I feel like it's not even the case of the world is gonna like even it out or whatever. It's just that I have very little energy. I think again, given the start of my week last week, the pressure with the again not getting some not getting one of my previous like salary or like jobs paid as expected. I was like, whoa, this is nerve wracking. But it's fine. Again, it's okay because it's getting there. It's looking good, and I'm more and more stressed, less and less stressed. Sorry, um, but yeah, it's been a roller coaster of a week. And then throughout the week, I've actually had my therapy session, which was quite nice. It was nice to catch up with my therapist. I went to see the physio again. Haven't seen her for a couple of weeks as well for different reasons, and now I've managed to get an appointment, and it's good, because my back still hurts. I had to make some changes in regards to my workout. And yeah, now I do like a part-time job for a couple hours where I have to like stand on my feet, and that kind of showed, at the end of the week, like yesterday and today and the day before. I wake up and I'm like, oh my god, my feet are like really sore, like my calves are sore. But I use those like well, it's not a Shakti mat, it's this like Shakti leg wraps, which is like loads of needles basically. um it hurts a little bit. You're meant to start at 5 minutes and then you go up to 20. I used to do 20 just fine, but I haven't used it for like a month. And now when I got back into it, it hurt a lot, a lot more than I remember. And I had to take it off and put it back on and so on. And I've managed to do like 20 minutes a day in the past 2 days. Um, I think this is pretty much everything from me, updates wise. I'd say yeah, keep an eye on the website, on my social media, just to see what gigs I'm doing and yeah, what's happening um, in a much like with a much better notice. Um, I feel like I forgot to tell you something. I can't remember what, but I feel like I'm forgetting something. And yeah, look, this episode is good. It's a good episode. Um, you're gonna listen to my conversation with Gilly, and we only met a few weeks ago, or maybe like a month ago now. Oh, it's hard to tell. Times are, yeah. It's hard to tell. It feels like it's almost you know half of this year gone, and I don't even know if we're in 2025 or 26. I even that's very confusing. But yeah, I've met Gilly not long ago, and she's a lovely person. And then she's super funny, but she's also lovely, and it was amazing speaking with her. It was quite interesting. I've learned a few things I didn't know about, and she's got a very interesting story as well. So that was pretty cool, and I was quite privileged to have her share that with me and now with you. So yeah, check out the episode, see how you get on, and I hope you enjoy this as much as we enjoyed recording and putting it together. And I'll catch you before we say goodbye for this week. Do you do the a lot of did you do a lot of like work remote as well? How was it like actually during the pandemic?
Yeah, you know what? I don't think any of us knew what that was going to demand of us because I had never had so many online meetings before. And then when I start during the pandemic, we learned like, oh, we're going to have to do this all the time. And it would never have occurred to me beforehand how draining that is.
And where were you at the time?
I was in South Africa in Johannesburg living with my parents.
Right.
And I was always taking calls and meetings in my room because I realized like you speak so loud on those. You speak louder on those online calls for some reason than any other place on earth. And so in order not to irritate people and for my own privacy, I would be in my room. So I just find it quite exhausting. And now I live with somebody who's sometimes on calls all day. And I see him sometimes coming out of his room after like a few hours and he looks like finished. He just looks finished,
Oh, I have to do sometimes like because I'm studying again. So I have to do like remote classes in some days, and the amount of times I fall asleep in those classes, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, it makes sense because they are just draining and kind of like tedious and yeah.
It either feels like it's too much because it gets to the point where like we forget to take a break because of how intense it is.
Yes.
Or when it's not intense, you're just like, why are we doing this? This is a waste of time. And then I'm just like, lights out.
Yeah, I get you. I did a lot of during the pandemic. The work that I did online was mostly writing.
Interesting.
Like writing workshops and stuff like that for TV shows. So the one that I did only work. I think it would only worked because we're a team of 4 that are very close. We're close friends,
Right.
and we had already made a season before. So we'd been in a room together And we've known each other some of us since we were teenagers. So we have a shorthand and that works. And I think that's the only reason we succeeded in doing our writer's room with 4 people in different countries. But I don't know that it would have gone so smoothly otherwise. I wouldn't want to do that again. And I did do 1 or 2 other ones where they all took place online.
But then in those situations when you're writing a show remotely, then when it's about like reading, were like people reading in person, or they were also like the readings were done like everything was done remotely?
Everything was done remotely. But it was, I think, made easier by the fact, like I said, we all had already had a season. We were all very strong on the ideas and the characters. We knew how to imagine them in our heads when we were writing, so it wasn't so hard. But it was tiring, draining.
You know, I was also thinking about because you were talking about like living in South Africa, in Johannesburg, with your parents,
yes,
and having to like take those like work calls in your bedroom. Were you living with your parents at the time anyway, or was it a result of like, oh, the pandemic is starting, what's happening?
No, it was. I was living with them anyway, but I wasn't planning on. It was supposed to be temporary, you know. And also, I was one of the reasons I stayed living with them was because my next plan was to travel, to go overseas.
Right.
So I was like, "There's no point in me trying to find a place now. My next move is to go." And so that's kind of why it was kind of like a sort of a time of change. Going to be a time of change anyway.
Fair. And then now, before we go like to the beginning, to the making of Gilli, what do you?
You're gonna talk to my parents about that.
Yeah, I'll have the part 2.
Yeah.
No, but I was going to ask you about the. I was going to ask you about how was it the first time when you left like South Africa now to like travel and like do comedy overseas? Was that the first time, or have you done it before?
No, I had done it before. The first time I went to do comedy overseas, I'm trying to think what the actual first time was. It may have been, it may actually have been Tel Aviv, but that was incidental because that's where my family is. So it was the first time I went and tried to, but it was in English.
Yeah.
And it was the first time I did comedy outside of South Africa.
Right.
But like I said, I didn't go there specifically to do that. I went there to see family at the time, and it was probably 2016 or 17. But then afterwards, the next time I did it for the first time overseas was in Switzerland in 2018 or 19.
Interesting.
Yeah, in Zurich, because I went on a tour with a small group of comedians who took me on tour with them. They come to South Africa to do their show.
Right.
I was on their shows in South Africa, and they were like, you know what, do you want to come with us to Europe? So I went on like a 2-week European tour with them, and I did a spot on their show. And I tried to do some comedy clubs here and there wherever I could after my sets on their show. So that was the first time, I think, I would say it was probably 2019.
And then how did you get to meet the people that you... how did you make like those connections, with these people?
So in South Africa, I did a show called Story Party, True Dating Stories. This was a show run by a guy called Ruckman Blake, who's a good friend of mine. Great, like sort of comedy business mind, but also excellent comedian. And he brought his show to South Africa. And what they would do is, it was a dating themed stand-up show with like stories from the audience and all this stuff. He'd been doing it since like 2013, I think, was the first time he did this show.
No way.
Yeah. And eventually he started to tour it all over the world. And everywhere they went, there was always him and like another comedian who had a prominent role in the show. And in every city, what they would do is they would get local acts to do a short set within the show.
Right.
So they would go to every city on earth. Like they toured the world with this show. Like insane. It was insane. And there was a point at which, like maybe for a year or two, he had never been home. He was just on the road for that long.
Yeah.
And in every city, they would find a local comedian with sort of the right content to do a set on the show. And when they came to South Africa, they did a show in Cape Town, and I met a woman who was on the show. She asked me to do the show in Johannesburg. Then they left. They came back a year later. They did the show again, invited me to come do a set on the show in Johannesburg. Then they liked it, so they were like, do you want to come with us to Cape Town? Cool. And then they were like, do you want to come with us to Durban? Cool. And then finally, he started asking me to come touring with them because it made it easier for him, to not have to find a new comedian in every city. It was just like one extra bit of like a challenging bit of admin. And I was obviously an English speaking comedian with a passport that allowed me to travel to these countries without much trouble. So he would bring me out for like these stints, like 2 weeks here, 3 weeks there. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. It was a really amazing opportunity that that ended up parlaying into what I'm doing today. So, sometimes you don't like, I didn't know then it seemed like an amazing opportunity anyway. Like, wow, I'm being taken overseas. All my expenses are being paid. I'm being paid well to do stand up. Like, that's a dream. Right. And now, actually, that was like the catalyst for one of the biggest, like, life-changing parts of my comedy, I think, that meeting.
Interesting, because then if you're, because you the catalyst, how come, like, because when you started doing stand-up, what are you thinking, what do you like, hey, like, what was your basically like first like train of thought, I guess, when you were like, oh, I'm gonna do stand-up? Like what would you like to be? I don't know, like, again, like a South African, like comedy legend, or were you already thinking about like a international comedy scene? Or
yeah, I very much saw it as international, for a number of reasons. I think, I guess that's who I grew up watching, is American comedians,
right.
and also I mean, it depends. It sort of shifted over the years. My plan in the beginning was just to try and be good at the thing,
Yeah.
And I guess I did have like a vision of wanting to be an internationally touring comic, because I just thought that I could, and I thought that it was, yeah. I mean, that was part of my dream, I guess. Yeah.
And now, have you changed a lot in regard to basically like on regards of what you wanted to do, I guess, like as a comedian, on material, persona on stage, stuff like that? Have you changed a lot from the beginning, or do you pretty much kept the same, again, same line, same type of like making the jokes,
same delivery
persona?
I think, I am very, I don't think I've changed much. I also remember, like, I started my career when I was already an adult. You know what I mean? I was 33 when I started stand up. So, I anyway am a person who I already had a very strong sense of myself. I didn't go like, there's not, if you look at, I think if you track me all the way back to when I was a child, there's not major variation. Do you know what I mean? There are not like big like freak phases. It's like, it's very consistent. So if I think about it now, yeah.
You haven't had like an emo phase, or
I had teenage phases,
of course,
but even then, I think I had a strong sense of myself, and it hasn't changed dramatically from then to now.
Interesting.
Yeah.
How come? Was like, is that something that you got from your parents, I guess, or?
I think I'm just a person with one of those. I've never thought about it this way, but now that I think about it, I go like, yeah, I mean, 6-year-old Gilli is similar, more shy maybe, but similar. Like,
that's interesting.
Yeah.
So you were, because then now again we're slowly going to the beginnings.
Yes.
It's like, did you like, do you doubt yourself a lot, or were you doubting yourself as a child, or?
I think probably yes. I like to think of myself as a fairly self-assured person. I don't doubt myself in like my day-to-day that much. But when I think about how long it took me to start stand-up, I go, yeah, there could not have been a bigger self-doubter. Why did I start stand-up at 33 and not 23 like I should have?
Right.
If I was so self-assured, I would have started then. But I think as a young person, I let a lot of fear run me, and a lot of external opinion run me. If I think about, like, in high school, I was like doing acting, like a drama class, and I had a teacher who, after my final exam, told me that she thinks I'm more suited, and without a shred of irony, she, after my final exam, told me, I think you're better at theory than practice. And I mean, that when I forgot about it, but I often cite it as like a thing that gave me a massive knock. And I was like, oh. And there were other things I wanted to do. I wanted to be a filmmaker. So that was sort of my next thing. And I think that's what I buried myself in. I was like, okay, I'm not an actress. That's not for me. I'm not in front of the scenes kind of a person. I'm going to be a behind the scenes kind of a person. And it's not only from a personality perspective, I did enjoy those crafts. Like I was very obsessed with like photography and making images and making videos and doing all that kind of visual creative stuff. It was like a full passion for me. So it's not like I saw it as a backup or a thing that I was choosing because it was really, I was very passionate about it. But if I think about why I delayed being a performer for so long, I definitely think there was like seeds of doubt cast in me that I didn't have when I was a child, maybe.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Because then that leads me to the next question, which was, so then stand-up comedy was, what was your first outlet? Like as in like artistic outlet, even from when you like grew up? Was it, because you're talking about like film
Yes.
and you're like acting? Is that what you?
My first artistic outlets were physical crafts like painting. And,
Oh,
yeah.
do you still do that now?
No, not at all. Not
What?
at all. I used to love it.
Way.
Yeah. Yeah. Painting, like all kinds of like design, collage making, stuff like that. Like I went to advertising school. Like I learned art direction.
Oh.
Yeah. So I did that for a year before they kicked me out because I couldn't keep up with the assignments because I actually wasn't interested in making brochures for you know, a company.
No way.
It's like we often laugh, me and my best friend who we went to the school together. But we went to this like very difficult to get into design college in Cape Town. It was really hard. But she was very determined that we both go together. And I was like, well, if I can't go to film school in New York because it's too expensive, I'll just do this. That's fine.
Wow,
and
that's a very
I know, I know,
high bar.
I know. And because I was like, oh, I'm going to film school in New York. And my parents were like, really? How are you going to do that?
Like, oh, yeah.
Oh, what? You? Okay, shit. Didn't see this coming. Anyway, so I went to study advertising, art direction, which is the lie that is taught to every creative young person who needs to answer to some kind of commercial thing. Like if you've got parents who expect you to even slightly bring in an income and you have a creative like out some kind of you are a creative person, and the advertising world seems appealing because it seems like a way that you can take your creativity and make money from it, right? It can be like a commercial and a way of earning a living with your art, but it is not that at all. It is like, so I'll give you an example. Like we had to do projects like make a brochure for a child's primary school, for a new the specific kind of primary school, or invent a new ice cream. Sounds like a great project, right? And some people do really well with that kind of thing. But I have never been able to invent anything. I'm not an inventor, you know. I can see something and fashion it into something else or be inspired by something and create something, but I can't like come up with some new concept. That's never been a strong suit of mine. But oh man, did I love finding pictures of ice creams and, you know, like coloring them in and drawing them. And then I had this like book. There was this book called A Visual Diary that you had to submit every couple of weeks, and they would look at it. It's very personal. You did whatever you want in that diary, but you had to make some progress in it. And I was brilliant at that. I got like 100% for my visual diary, which was just do whatever you want in a creative form, right? We don't get in your way. But to do a task that they set out for me to accomplish with a commercial aim, I could not do. So anyway, I eventually went to film school after that, but not in New York. I went to film school in Johannesburg, which, you know.
Almost the same.
Hey?
Almost the same.
Almost the same.
I would think after New York.
New York, Johannesburg, same. Exactly the same.
But then, you know, the thing is, because how old were you when that happened? Because it's like university.
Young. I was 17 when I went to that college in Cape Town. And then when I came back to film school, I was 18 and I was like old.
But this is, you see, this is the thing where you're like, what was it like to, like, did your parents know about this? Or like, you know, like getting kicked out of the...
Yeah, I didn't tell them. It was halfway through the year that me and my 3 friends who were all sitting at the same table together got called in. And we were like, look, you're very creative. You've got a lot of potential, but you got to start applying yourself or by the end of the year, you'll be out. And so I did not apply myself. And by the end of the year, I was out. And so my 3 friends, we always laugh about it. But they all went on to do great things in other fields, you know. We were very young. So it was correct to kick us out.
What were you like, how stressed were you at the time when that happened?
I don't remember.
Did you like chill?
I don't remember being too stressed. I think I remember being like worried that my parents were going to make me leave Cape Town because that was my main concern. Cape Town was so amazing to live in.
Right.
And that's part of the reason I mean, it was a silly enterprise to send a 17-year-old to Cape Town, like the most incredible city in the world, and like expect that they're going to fucking put their heads down and do some work, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what my parents did. They brought me home. They were like, sorry, you can't just dick around in Cape Town for another year.
But then, when you were in Cape Town, because I've never been to South Africa, I don't know much. I mean, I know, I don't know much about it. Because then you grew up in Johannesburg.
Yeah.
And you were saying like Cape Town was so different.
Well,
like,
Cape Town is like a beautiful beach city.
Oh, okay, interesting.
Like the most beautiful beach city you can possibly imagine.
Right.
And Johannesburg is a city.
Right.
And so that's the basic difference. I mean, just imagine like.
And then is that like, was that the first? So the first time when you went to Cape Town was when you got into?
No, I had been there before. Yeah.
Right.
Been
Okay.
on trips and stuff. It's a holiday destination, basically.
Oh, okay. That was my next question. So it's kind of like where you go in the summer, or when you have like I don't know, like school breaks and stuff like this. Interesting. But then now, so you're in the acting. What was it? The acting academy or like school or
after that?
Yeah, in Johannesburg.
Film school.
Film school in Johannesburg.
Yeah.
And then you still have you like done any like, because I know lots of people in university they do stand up.
No, I only did stand up years later. But what I did after film school is I started writing for TV, because trying to be a director was almost impossible. You start doing other things like commercials and stuff like that, and I found that the way that I managed to get into the TV industry was writing for TV. It was an easier way to get in than directing. And my first thing that I worked on was a TV show for a comedian who, his name is Mark Lottering. He's a very successful, well-known South African comedian in Cape Town. And he had like a biographical TV show, like a classic comedy, like a sitcom that's based on the comedian, and it's not really the comedian, correct? It's like that. And so I was a junior sort of storyliner on that show. And after that, it went from like one TV show to another. So I wrote on comedies, and really that's the only writing I ever wanted to do. And in fact, in my film school career, like all I wanted to do was make comedies. Just comedies. I wasn't willing to write or direct or do stuff that wasn't. I experimented a little bit for the sake of experimenting, but really that's what I was interested in, is comedy.
Interesting.
Yeah. I wanted to make comedies and comedy films and comedy TV. And ultimately I started writing for a lot of comedy shows and started writing over the years for comedians. And one comedian in particular, who's a Jewish comedian in South Africa named Nick Rabinovitz, who I met because I was supposed to write. I wrote in a pilot for a talk show, a comedy talk show that he was going to be the host of.
Right.
But ultimately that didn't work out. But what did work out is my relationship with him. I carried on writing for him for years and years and years. And over the years, he really tried to push me to do stand-up.
Interesting.
Yeah. And I always had it as an idea in the back of my mind, but I'd never had the whatever courage it takes to get up there.
But then throughout this time, because like, was it the sort of, what was it like, I guess, job security wise, like when you finished university, you got into being like a junior writer?
Yes.
But then was it like you say like a linear sort of progression? Or
Not at all. People often, I've had so many people, young people, especially in South Africa, ask me how to get into writing and TV. And I feel so bad for them, because I'm like, I don't know how to tell you that you have to invent a path, and it's like you're not even gonna have any control over it for so long,
Yeah.
Unless you are exceptionally enterprising and you can write like nobody's business. I never saw myself as very good at writing, in the sense that I'm a good writer of comedy. I can write jokes.
Right.
I can even tell you how to improve your script by, I don't know, a 1,000,000%. But I struggle to, I struggle to initiate and invent things, I struggle to write plot. So I'm a great team writer. And then afterwards I can write the shit out of something, but I've never been good at inventing stuff necessarily, to an extent. But the point is, that path was like, I mean, you get out of like a film school and then you're like, I don't know, I hope this shit works out, And hope is just not a strategy. I wish I had known back then to be much more aggressive in the pursuit of what I was doing.
Why?
Because I think that I was harboring this delusion that, like many creative people do, is that I just keep my head down and do my work and get good at my little drawings, for lack of a better thing. I'm just going to sit here and put my head down and paint those little picture. And then someone is going to come, the long arm of Hollywood is just going to like reach into my bedroom in South Africa and like be like, you are the chosen one, and lift me out of obscurity. And, it's going to be my big break. I think we all operate on this sort of big break vibe.
Yeah, I think it's very common.
Yeah. And I think I believed in that for much longer than I should have. It blinded me to the fact that I wasn't making progress.
How did you define progress at the time?
I mean, if I thought about like when I left film school, I wanted to make films and TV.
Right.
And 10 years later, I had not done that.
Right,
and
okay.
in South Africa, it's not, okay, to be fair, I put a lot of the blame on myself. To be fair, I was not in the right environment. 10 years later, no one else had either made a film or done TV. You know what I mean?
Fair.
I can tell you, out of the era of filmmakers that I grew up with, there are maybe 3 who are still standing and actually making, who are real filmmakers who support themselves through their craft and who haven't done some other thing.
Oh.
Like long form entertainment filmmakers who actually make TV shows and, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Who haven't gone off into doing a million other film related tasks. So I think that I was under the illusion that I was making progress, but I wasn't. I was in the writing. I was working on one show and then another show and then getting a better role. And then like, okay, more of a actual screenwriter as opposed to a storyline. I was making progress there, but in the filmmaking, I was not making progress. But when you're young, you don't realize you're not making progress. At least I didn't. I didn't see that there was nothing measurable from from like one ad to a corporate video. So you ask about job security. That's how I made a living, right? I made a lot of corporate videos.
Right.
For banks, for corporate entities, stuff like that. End of year corporate video discussing like the fucking, KPIs of the bank. By the time I finished, I was like, 5 years in, I was like, I could work at this bank. Like, I'd make more money,
Yeah.
I should leave making films about banks, just work in the bank.
Yeah.
There was one in South Africa. I did a lot of videos for a company called SAB, South African Breweries. Huge, huge company. And at some point, I had made so many videos for this company that I was like, I once met the CEO because we were making a video with him.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know what? I was like, just, you could slot me in at any level. Because I know all of your departments. I know how everything is run, how everything is connected. Like, I just know this whole business. You could put me in anywhere. From like the guy who delivers, who like does the logistics for the trucks that get sent out, or like you could put me in any role.
Damn.
So anyway, I was doing that stuff thinking I was making progress and not making progress. And when I started stand up, and I've spoken about this a lot, so maybe we should take it in a different kind of direction. But when I started stand up and I started to make progress creatively and get more, okay, in the beginning, you're just doing open mic spots. Progress isn't in stand up in the beginning is not financial, and it's not. The progress is emotional. It's like it's almost like not even yet. You don't even realize it. It's not even yet. Am I succeeding in making people laugh? It's like, oh my God, can I withstand what goes on stage when I'm standing there? Can I stand there?
Yeah. Yeah.
And can I continue to stand there while I am not good yet?
Makes sense. Yeah.
So in the beginning, it's so incremental. Like the first time I got on stage, I was blinded by lights and dizzy from the sound of my voice on the speakers. So I'm like, the second time, is it better? The third time, is it better? Oh, can I stand up? Can I withstand? Oh, the third time, it's going terribly, but I now know how to rein back control and end the set and leave on my terms,
Right.
And the second time, I didn't know that. I just bombed and bombed and bombed. The third time, I was like, this is not going well. I'm going to leave. And that's like a first little bit of control,
Yeah.
The next time, it's like, oh, that didn't work. I'm not going to do that again. Let me try this thing. So, that's the progress in the beginning. Afterwards, you start to think about, okay, am I getting booked? Am I doing well? Are people laughing? How much are they laughing? How much am I failing or succeeding over time? Confidence. Am I getting more confident? So once I started seeing progress in comedy a few years into it, where I'm like getting booked more often, I'm starting to earn a bit, I was like, I can't tell you when it happened, but I realized I had not been making any progress in my other career, which I had been using to fund this new career,
Yeah.
Before I just went into it full time. But I was like, it took a long time for me to realize, like, oh, that was actually a failure. I didn't do any of the things I set out to do 15 years ago.
But you see, this is a very interesting concept because I was wondering about how it almost feels like when you're again new, or like when you're about to start something, you're almost like you're meant to be good at like a lot of things, because you were talking about how lots of the filmmakers or like people that you started with are from around the same period of time, where you're like only three of them kind of like stand out, as in like, oh, they haven't had to do a lot of different things. But it almost sounds like I feel like naturally what I hear from most people, it's kind of like, oh, if you're a comedian, you have to do a bit of acting, you have to do a bit of this, you have to do a bit of that, so that you can actually afford to be
a comedian,
what you want to be. Yeah. But then, from what you're saying is that actually, when you're looking back, or when you're looking from a retrospective, I guess,
yes,
you're actually like, you're doing well when you're very good, like this one thing, or you're doing well in this one field.
yes,
and that's enough.
So I don't think that those guys who are still standing in film didn't have to do a lot of other things. They did.
Yeah.
But they also made sure that they were progressing in the actual thing they were doing.
Got it.
And they were using those things actively to support the thing they wanted to do. I didn't know how to do that, but that was because they were very they had a lot of metal, they had a lot of grit, and they were able to understand that the parts of filmmaking that they don't like are part of the parcel, and they're not separate. Like it took me a long time to understand that, like, and that's why I knew that was necessary when I got into stand-up. Is I didn't understand like that being a filmmaker requires you to love the work of getting the thing made as much as the work of telling the story. You have to be able to produce your work.
Right.
You have to actually have some kind of passion for overcoming the obstacles of resource finding, right? Like getting money for your film, getting a distributor for your film, having those relationships, you have to understand from the first instant that is part of the filmmaker's world. You have to create the thing in all its aspects. You have to take responsibility for that. And if you wait for someone else to do it, you will wait 15 years and it may never happen.
Interesting.
So I do see that. And so I was fortunate actually in the sense that when I got to stand up, I didn't have to do any other things that were related to stand up. I could just do the stand up. And I knew that I have to keep doing my work that I'm doing to support stand up before I have to let stand up support me. Like I cannot afford in this early budding stage of stand up, because it was very precious to me and I loved it so much that I was like, I have to protect this thing from commerce in my life. I know that the second I have to earn a living from this thing, my relationship with it will change. And so I made a conscious effort to keep doing the work that I was doing so that I could support myself, so that I could have a car to drive to gigs, so that it didn't matter if a spot came up and it was for free and it was far away.
Yeah.
So I could get on a flight to Cape Town and do a week of gigs in Cape Town and stay with a friend, but I'd have enough money to be there for a week and do the work and not have to rely on what I'm getting paid for it.
Right.
Because I knew I needed to get good first before I could rely on it and protect it to an extent. Yeah.
Fair.
Yeah.
That's do you have like such an or have you always had this sort of, because it sounds like everything that you're saying, it sounds very good, like from I guess like a logical perspective, like you're very logistics wise, you're like, oh yeah, that makes so much sense.
You become very logical when you're 40.
Yeah, but then is that when you became?
None of this was ever this clear to me.
Okay,
Absolutely
okay,
not. It was
okay.
all very, very murky. It was all very distant. It was all a mess. I was like, especially when I was in my 20s and early, into my early 30s, I was like, I don't know how any of this shit works out. Like, I just guess I got to just keep doing what I'm doing. But I think I was governed by a lot of fear. I should have been, even in my film career,
Yeah,
I should have left South Africa. I should have gone to where there was more work. I should
right,
have, you see, because the fact that I wasn't making any progress and that no one around me was making progress is that there
right.
was no competition to look at and be like, oh, why is that person succeeding and I'm not? So I guess we're all moving forward at the same pace. You don't realize you're not moving forward. Okay. So that's a big thing
Very fair.
because I was in an industry that was not progressing at the time. It was static. And
Right.
there were many good reasons for it. And it's all to do with the South African economy and the South African leadership and how our institutions fell apart at that time, including our national broadcaster. And all of that had an impact on me and on my fellow filmmakers and creative people. And I didn't realize it. So it's only like now I look back and I go like, oh, there was nothing happening. It was almost impossible as an industry.
Yeah.
It was a failing industry. No wonder I failed. And I don't want to blame all of it on that. I take most of the responsibility on me first and foremost, because my friends who succeeded, I mean, I think they were just much better at seeing what the moment was. And they worked harder in a way that they understand that they basically understood the assignment. They knew what they had to do, basically, and I did not.
That's a very nice way of. That's a very nice saying. They understood the assignment.
Yes.
I love that.
Yes.
Yeah, but it's kind of like you. Yeah, it is.
I didn't get it. I was like, somebody will come and sort this out for me.
But I think
very
again,
passive.
it makes sense though, because like that's the. I think if I were in your situation, I probably would have done the same thing. Or kind of because it's hard to see it from the outside, or like it's hard to almost think it as an outsider when you're actually from the system.
Yes.
It's because like when you again, I feel like look, when I think about like say TV, like things are happening in Romania,
Yeah.
and then even things are happening in England, because I've got the mind of like, oh yeah, actually, well, I'm an outsider here. I also feel like as an outsider in Romania because I left for so long. But then I'm like, yeah, I see, I have a perspective. But then the thing is, I remember when I first came from Romania, or I was like, oh yeah, this like whatever I see in here, this bubble is the only thing that it looks good, however whatever it is.
Right. Yes.
So that's why I'm like, yeah, it makes so much sense to think. Because also, like, obviously, if because I don't know, like in South Africa, I imagine you pay for university. Yeah. So like a university is not going to tell you like, oh, by the way, this degree is going to get you nowhere because television is failing.
Of course, yes, of course. But also, I think that you must remember South Africa was an evolving democracy at the time. When I went to film school, it was 10 years post the end of apartheid, right? So it's fresh and new. And we were under the impression that we were part of a cohort of new filmmakers who were going to transform the industry. We were going to be pioneers in this industry. So there was nothing before us that was as, we didn't have like a robust industry to step into necessarily. We understood that we were going to initiate something. We were like, part of the first few graduates of the film school. So it seemed very exciting, and it seemed like there was going to be a lot of opportunity. And we didn't realize that we were coming out of film school, and a few years later, all of those institutions, power utility, the medical framework, everything was going to collapse. So I think we thought we understood what was going on. We just didn't realize that, like, oh yes, we might have been pioneers, but there was, but too much was against us. You know what I mean? The environment just was not, what's the word? Fertile enough. Not fertile. Actually, you couldn't blame us if you look back.
Yeah.
To think it was a massive opportunity and that we were going to be some kind of pioneers. We didn't realize that the forces that were working against that were much greater than we could counter.
You see, this is it's very interesting what you were saying now, because it made me think of the sort of like post-communist era in Romania,
Right.
where in the similar thing where everyone was like, oh, like the national television, like there is going to be new broadcasters, there's going to be new people doing new things. But then the problem is the people who were there even before that, it's not like they are going anywhere, like they don't
Correct.
disappear. So I remember reading about this stuff when I was, again, like a teenager, when I was back home, and I would yeah, just because like I wouldn't say I wasn't a conspiracy theorist, absolutely not. But I would read stuff on like, oh, this is interesting, or like, oh, this sounds, and then you'd see all these things where it's like, oh, again, there were people who were very successful during communism, but they didn't disappear, they didn't go anywhere, and it's almost like the new generation felt as if, oh, you have the liberty to do whatever you want, but actually you don't, because the boundaries that were set by the same people. So although, say, they weren't the ones in charge, like the person in charge of the national television wasn't in charge of national television, but the guidance that he left was still there.
Absolutely. All the framework for the behavior and mentality.
Exactly. So you think that, oh, I can do whatever I want, but actually you can't do whatever you want, because you have to adhere to those limits.
Absolutely.
And then you don't really see it, and then you're wondering, oh, like, why aren't we doing so well? And I'm like, well,
it's very interesting what you say, because I think a lot of people in South Africa don't realize how much of an impact that had. I always used to say that, for example, our national broadcaster, its main aim when I was coming up, it took me a few years to figure this out, that the main aim of the national broadcaster was not to produce content, was not to entertain the public, was not to inform the public. The absolute first priority was to maintain an air of political correctness and favorability towards the leadership. And it's ironic because it was the leadership then was the ANC, right?
I have no idea.
The party that liberated South Africa from apartheid.
Right.
Right. So we had this, Nelson Mandela comes into power. South Africa is supposed to flourish. It's supposed to be a free society, a democratic society, one of the most successful and robust constitutions in the world up until that time. And so you would think, so years later, people often ask, like, why does South Africa never have any good comedy on TV? And it's like, guys, I've been there for the last 20 years. I've seen what's happened. In our institutions, we still have this conservative mentality that is like, you've got to toe the party line. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Even though the party has completely changed.
Yeah.
The conservative nature of the thing is still there and in the blood of the institution. And they have not been able to reform it.
It's incredible, because again, I've never done, like, which I feel like now I feel very bad about it, because I should have maybe perhaps done some research into this, but it sounds so Romania like, where I remember, because at the time, I don't know, like, so many things that you say, they're like, it makes sense, because it's kind of like, oh, you must, like, again, you must favor the who's in power. But I thought the whole ambition is so that you don't necessarily fear the people who are in power. Like, you could speak up your mind, although maybe nobody agrees with it, that's a different thing, but you have the outlet to do it. But then it's actually
exactly so in South Africa, for example, the theory is you could say whatever you want, but then the thing wouldn't get produced, And okay, fair enough, that's a national broadcaster, but let's just say there's a private broadcaster, which eventually there was. They operated with the same structures and the same people who came from the same mentality as the thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they've not managed to counteract that to this day.
Yeah, and you see, it's such it's vicious circle, because it's almost like, oh, I want to, because I remember, for example, talking about like politics stuff, because I remember when it was like, oh, we need a fresh generation of like politicians, with fresh generation of people on TV, although those people were raised by the people who were actually not fresh, who were the old school, gang. And then it's almost like, oh, but why did they fail? And I'm like, yeah, but that's why they failed, because you're kind of like, oh, we're going to start our new thing, which is going to be different. But then just the fact that you've started something else, it doesn't mean it's different.
Yes.
It's just something else. And then you still have to make it different. You can't just be...
The spirit has to be different.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's... It's very interesting, because, sometimes like, I feel like, especially, again, for example, it shows my level of like ignorance, where I'm like, South Africa is so far away. Why would I know anything about it? But then you actually hear stuff and you're like, actually, those things, like, everywhere, the similarities are actually huge.
Ignorance is okay if you're willing to be open.
Yeah, no, I think, again, I'm
I often say, like, the other day I do this joke about a history and how, like, here in Europe, South Africans don't. The average South African does not give a shit about what's happening in Ukraine. And people are quite shocked when I say it. And I'm like, yeah, but you also don't give a shit about what's happening in Zambia.
True.
You know? So like, it's just like, it doesn't affect my it's not anywhere close to my lived reality, you know, unless a person, of course it affects you. Everything that's happening in the world affects all of us somehow, but interest, why should people be interested in
But
it?
I feel like I think I've learned this maybe like a couple of years ago in regards to, because I feel like, you know, people, I found that lots of people hate to be called like, oh, you're being ignorant. And then 2 years ago, I was like, you know, actually, because it makes people uncomfortable, you know, like, oh, you're just being ignorant. But then it's actually, I don't think you can live any other way.
No.
Because my theory is that, you know, if I were to not be ignorant and just look out for myself, for the people around me, for things I care about, I'd be miserable for like the rest of my life. Because there is never, because every time you
never get a rest.
You get something good, something worse has happened. You know, like this is the thing. You're kind of, you know, you're hearing about like some positive things, and then it's like, oh, actually, Third World War might actually happen, and then you're like, holy shit. And then, well, I'm like, you know what? Until it happens, because like this is the thing. I even remember, because obviously, when did you come to London?
Maybe 2 years ago ish.
2 years ago, but like last summer when they were like, oh, in West London there were those like far right.
Yes.
I live in East London and I didn't give a fuck about.
Even London, you don't.
Yeah, yeah. I was just like, if it's not in my route to work,
yeah. It's funny because when I was in South Africa, often like I would hear about like environmental things happening in other places in the world, like especially in Europe, if there was like, you know, torrential rains and floods in northern England or something, and I was in South Africa, or an earthquake in Los Angeles, right? South Africa has got a lot of problems, but one thing that has not happened is like we don't have a lot of environmental shit that happens to us. We do have fires and we do have floods, but we don't have like cataclysmic things like earthquakes, you know, or tornadoes or hurricanes or things like that. And so whenever something like that happens, I would always be like, oh God, you know what? At least that we feel so safe down here, far away from all of that, right? But then one day I was taking a flight from Dublin to Bristol or something, or Bristol to Dublin or something like that. And I remember like looking up at the board and a flight was cancelled to Greece because there were these huge floods in Greece.
Yeah.
And my mentality instantly was, thank God I'm so far away from that. And then I was like, wait a minute, I'm not far. It's right here. Shit, you know? And now like when I see floods in England, I'm like, oh no, you know? And it's like, it's so funny how like physically I'm now closer and I didn't realize it. Because in your head, you can be far away. I'm still looking at the same screen.
There is, yes, but the thing is also, because I especially with the Greece floods, I remember hearing about it, and then they were like, oh yeah, the floods happen and like the water raised, and I was like, oh, yeah, but they must have like a drainage system, you know?
Yeah.
Because I grew up in Romania and we have drainage.
Yeah.
They were like, oh, actually they don't. And my first thought was like, well, that's a silly
mistake.
It's not a silly mistake. But then I was like also like, oh yeah, well again, it's sad. But it's almost like on the sort of, you know, thing where it's like, oh, there are like starving children. Like, yeah, it's sad. Like I'm really my heart goes to those children, but also I'm here. Yeah. I want to make sure that, you know, like things that are happening and things that are around me, I'm looking after those things, because otherwise
that's
I think
reasonable.
And then this thing, the problem, I for years I've lost my mind over, you know, every single thing, and then I was like, nah, I can't do this.
No, you can't survive mentally.
Yeah, it's too much. It's like you're and again, like with even like political stuff and things like in Romania, for example, as well, because we're also like a new democracy.
Right.
I was quite like
I don't know anything about Romania. Totally ignorant.
No way, no. How do you not know? No, it's the thing is, again, it's a young democracy. It's not doing well.
Is that why it's so hard for me to get my passport?
Why?
No, I'm trying to get a Romanian like citizenship.
Ah.
Because I have my grandparents are Romanian,
right?
And It's not. I haven't yet come across any issues yet. It's just taking me so long just to complete the first few steps.
Well, I don't know if it's, but again, the bureaucracy in Romania, it's quite ridiculous.
Yes,
Like,
I've heard so.
Yeah, like I think like changing my name, I had to. Well, this is also why I haven't done the official process in Romania, because you have to like give all your documents in, and you just almost like you just have to wait around.
Yeah, well, I'm looking for documents still. Like every time, I'm like, okay, I need this document. Now, between what you must understand is between Romania's bureaucracy and South Africa's incompetence, it can take you 100 years. Now it's like, no, you have to get a police clearance, right?
Yeah.
It's one of the things you have to do applying for it. So then I go to South Africa. If you understand what it's like to go to a South African police station and get anything done, you will die. You will die. You will age before they can get you one document. So it's like the two things really work beautifully together.
Well, I feel like you got like the best of the both worlds.
Yes.
But no, in Romania again, the bureaucracy it's wild, it's ridiculous. Because then, and that I was actually talking with someone else on the podcast, where I was like, I go to Romania now, for example, and then something happens, and I'm like, you know what? And this is why, like, I was giving this example of waiting at the DMV to like get number plates done or something like this for the car, and then someone comes in with a much more expensive car, they slip some money in the and then they go in front of you and you're like, hey, I've been waiting for 7 hours here.
Yeah, it's more or less like South Africa.
And you're like, this is a shithole, like I want to change the system. And then after this whole experience, 2 days later, there is my flight to England.
Yeah.
And I'm like, actually, I don't give a fuck. Yeah, I'm done. And that's where I jump in between.
Yes.
But I feel like even I remember I had my passport again like renewed, and I was like, hey, when is it coming? And they're like, but it's ready when it's ready. And I was like, this is
cool Romania. Cool.
Yeah, and it's like,
Romania, it's ready when it's ready.
Yeah, like I had to get I had to take my new ID in Romania, and I go to the station. My sister goes like, oh, by the way, when you do your papers, make sure you like slip some money in the
hilarious.
And I was like, why would I? Like, it's free. Like, this is the thing. If you don't have your ID, like if you don't have a new ID, an up-to-date ID, you get fined.
Hilarious.
And then if you want to go and do it, you have to, although it's meant to be a free service,
yeah, you have to pay.
You have to pay so that it's done. And I was like, I'm not paying. And then, I remember like I waited for like a week, didn't hear back. And then this is the thing. Luckily, we have some family that's But then my auntie calls me, and my auntie is like, "Hey, why the fuck did you not
put the money in?
Put the money in? You would have been done so much quicker." Or like she was like, "Why did you not call me straight away?"
Hilarious.
I was like, "Because I thought like again they tell you have to do it."
Yes.
My understanding is if I choose, I would like to have a new picture taken every year, fine, I'll pay because it's my choice to have.
You're
picture
so naive.
every year. I know, but again, and also like I know, and I feel like
this for you to be here where they do to a large extent follow the rules.
Yeah, but then also like sometimes you have the rules, and it's like, you have to wait in the queue, and then you have to do 10 push-ups.
Yeah, but they only wait in the queues because it's what they love. It's their favorite hobby in England.
Oh, you were no, because you said 2 years ago, so you weren't here during like when the pandemic. No, because you were talking about you were in South Africa. Yeah, it was crazy. I've never seen anyone like people just enjoying. Just sitting around, and I was like, I'm losing my mind. It was like 5 minutes, but I was like, I'm going crazy. Yeah, and everyone was like, no, it's okay, it's all good. Just like almost like having a picnic. Just carry a blanket. But anyway, oh God, I was gonna ask. Yeah, so then let's go. Let's go back to you, because then you were in South Africa. You started doing stand-up comedy. Were you was stand-up your full-time job or like main source of income before the pandemic? Already.
Good question. Not exactly.
So what was that like then? You know what?
It's weird. The more time passes, the less I can remember about like the transition of like I was doing this work. I was doing this like filmmaking sort of work, writing and filmmaking. Filmmaking, I say loosely. I was making like videos and ads, commercials, stuff like that.
Still film, so
yeah. And the more stand up I was doing, the less of that kind of work I got. And I was a freelancer, so that work started to almost magically dry up as I was doing more and more stand up.
Right.
And I think it's something like that. That's almost, if I was a more like spiritually minded person, I would put it in those terms because I never told anyone that I was no longer going to do that work. I never said to anybody, I never uttered the words, I'm going full time into stand up. But for some reason, that work just stopped coming to me. I stopped getting offers to do that kind of work.
Interesting.
And I started doing more and more stand up and getting more opportunities in stand up. And eventually, I guess I did find myself being sort of full time in stand up. And I got one or two opportunities that paid me well enough so that by the time the pandemic came around, I had done one or two well paying jobs. Like I did a commercial where I was the voice of like a Toyota ad. I was the voice of like one of the characters.
No way.
Yeah. And so I did that just before the pandemic hit. Then just before sort of enduring the pandemic, I was given this opportunity to do this Netflix show. There's like a lineup show on Netflix, like they have like the comedians of the world, all that stuff. So they were doing that with 6 South African comedians. And I got that. And throughout the pandemic, they were like, we're still going to do this. We just have to wait until we can. And eventually I was like, okay, the second I could get out of South Africa to go work, I did. So I'm trying to think of the timeline, but eventually, basically, I managed to get somehow South Africa had very, very, very strict COVID laws.
Right.
So it took me a long time to get out. And eventually there was a date set for the shooting of the Netflix thing, and there was no comedy in South Africa. So I wanted to go and tour or be on. I had, of the lineup of the comedians, I sort of had the least experience.
Right.
Especially in filmed stand-up. I had done the least amount of that kind of work before. So I wanted to make sure that I was like, my set was really tight and like, and it was very hard to do in South Africa because all of the comedy clubs had closed down during the pandemic and there were no gigs. So I got myself out of South Africa and went back on tour with this person who took me on tour before.
Yeah.
And it was a very long tour. So in between, I would go to English stand-up scenes like London and Berlin, where they have a lot of English stand-up shows to work on the set. And then I came back to South Africa and did that show.
Right.
Yeah. So,
but this is, the I feel like the mental gymnastics that you have to do to like, go, okay, so now, there are restrictions. I have to find a way to leave the country. Then,
what? It didn't take too long. I'm fortunate. I was fortunate and unfortunate in many senses. For stand-up, I was fortunate because I was not one of those people who went crazy that I couldn't do stand-up while I was in the pandemic.
Right.
My parents had a business that was absolutely falling apart during that time. So yeah. And so I was very panicked about that. I had my own, I wasn't too worried about my own career at that time. I was mainly concerned about my parents and their income and the business that they had spent basically most of their lives building. And it was very traumatic. It was like just every day trying to figure out how their business was going to stay together. They're almost 70 and they've had this business for long and they've got employees and they've got people that are dependent on them, and so all I did every day for the first 6 months of that pandemic was worry about that. I did not worry about anything else or my career or my stand-up or, any of that shit.
Yeah.
I was only invested in that. And it was like that for like a year maybe until eventually at the end of 2020, I think I managed to get back out on the road. And I went on tour with a local South African comedian, and then eventually toured internationally. And eventually, after the stand-up, after the Netflix little mini special thing, I was like, okay, I cannot submit to my passive attitude. And here's the thing. Here's why I missed the fact that I was not making progress is because I am hardworking. So I didn't realize I wasn't making progress because I thought, but I'm working very hard.
Yeah.
And you can work very hard and make no progress.
Yeah.
And I was not about to let that happen with my stand-up career. I was like, there's no way I can sit around and just wait. And like, I still now to this day have to fight the urge in me to be passive and resigned. Like,
yeah.
I am a big dreamer. I know how to work, but man, am I passive. Like the second somebody is willing to take over the reins, I will let go and kick back, baby. That's me. I'm actually very, very. My best friend. She's works very hard on her job, and I was like, I wish I could just not work. And she was like, Gilli, you'd get very tired of that very quickly. She said this to me years ago, and I was like, I know you've known me since we were children, but I feel like you really don't know me. I would find plenty to do if I didn't have to work.
Yeah.
But so I wasn't about to let that happen. I after Netflix, I was like, what can I use this for? Can I use this as a stepping stone to anything? And I was not in delusion. I had a very realistic understanding of what these things can and can't do for your career. I work in the film industry, so I know that we are in an era where it doesn't matter what big thing you do, it can disappear overnight. Nobody cares. And most of the world will not have seen it. So even if you are on Netflix, it doesn't matter. So my goal was like, I know what I'm going to use this. I'm going to use this to get gigs.
Yeah.
It's silly. It feels like such a big thing used for such a small purpose. Because in the past, if you did something like have a Netflix special or got on TV, it would open up the world to a fucking Hollywood movie or some shit, But now in the world we live in, you have to understand what the currency is of the thing that you do. And I knew that the currency of that thing was that I could go to LA, I could go to New York, I could go to London and say, can I get on your show at Top Secret, at The Cellar in New York, at wherever in LA, and be like, oh, really? Who are you? What the fuck have you done? Oh, where can I find your work? www.netflix.com, So I was like, what is going to be the value of this thing? And I knew that it had a shelf life, that it was going to be short-lived, how long I could use it for. So my goal was get out there and use it to make put some distance between current me and future me,
Yeah.
Like climb. Like I'm going to use this little bit of thing to climb up as fast as I can, to as far as I can. I don't know what it is, but I've got to go. And it was like, so I went. I did basically like a shopping tour of comedy scenes. I went to LA, went to New York, came to London. London was the place that was the most favorable to work. It's very easy to be allowed to work legally here.
Interesting.
America is not.
Right.
I had a place to stay here.
Right.
Just logistically, it was so much easier. And so, that's how
That's how it.
London. Yeah.
On the back of something that you were saying earlier, which I think it was again, it's quite amazing. Is the perspective of although I hope your folks are doing better or like that. Okay.
Better. Yeah.
But
still climbing, still working hard to put back together all the scraps. But yeah.
But you see, I feel like this notion of again, okay, you can't do this, but then there are other people, and especially like with you, like people in the same household, people in your family, your what, like the first, like on the first bloodline or whatever it's called, that are actually struggling with, because you're like, okay, my stand-up comedy, it's taking a hit because now the clubs are closed. It's sad.
I remember wishing that was my problem. I remember being so stressed, more stressed than I've ever been in my entire life, and thinking, like, listening to people talk about how bored they are, and I was like, I wish boredom was my problem right now,
Yeah.
I would love that. I would love it. Oh, I would chill so hard right now if I didn't have this crisis on my back,
And you see, this is the thing as well, where I'm like thinking about although again, unfortunately I lost my dad long before the pandemic, and then my mom sadly died during the pandemic.
Wow, that's hard.
But thank you. But
sure, I'm sorry.
No, all I'm trying to say is that like the reason why I'm trying to make this relevant is more to say that I can imagine being in your situation where I'm like, okay, cool, like I can't do something that, because I almost feel like imagine. I feel like for our generation to almost like we have so many, like it's more acceptable to be like, oh, I'm an artist, I want to explore this, but then to think of like my parents, for example, to then have to, which actually unfortunately happened with my dad, but for a different reason, where it's like you've built up this like empire for so long, and now it's like taken away from you. It's again, I might be terribly wrong, but in my head it feels much more like an hard, because at least to me, I'm kind of like, especially like in recent months, I was like, you know what, I'm struggling a bit. I'm just gonna get a job in retail. I'm just gonna do like, a couple of like fill up some shelves,
Yes.
and
Yes.
until I get back on my feet. But
Yes.
then to think that, say again, you already had a job which is meant to be solid, which is meant to give you the stability that when you get older, you're like, oh, I'm chill, I'm cool
Yes.
now.
Yes.
And then you're actually there is a whole like worldwide pandemic,
My God.
which you can't make up if you're, like I think talking about it, if you say we were 20 years ago and we were like, hey, can you imagine if there
No,
was this thing that's like
impossible to bloody imagine.
just closing down the whole world?
Impossible to imagine.
And then again, to us, which is, again, I feel like we are in a period of where, imagination is wilder.
Yes, you're right.
But to not have that, and then to be like, what?
Yeah, now I have to be imaginative at 67.
Yeah, you see, this
crazy.
this is where I was like, when you were talking about it, I was like, oh my god, yeah. And then, like you said, it's again the perspective of like, hey, like I'm having a rough time, but then, what about someone who's, because technically at least I think, again, I wasn't even started. I started stand up during the pandemic.
Oh, wow. Great
Yeah.
timing.
Yeah. I was like, hey, this looks like it's gonna progress very well. It looks like there is a future for
January 2020. What a dream. Eh?
No, it wasn't even January 2020. It was 20. Oh my god, it was October 2022.
Oh, okay, fine.
Yeah, 2022, because it's 3 years.
Okay.
Or 2021, October 2021.
Oh, that's okay.
Yeah, but it was like, I
It's
remember.
future, but if you started in the pandemic on the first day of like January, of like 2020, and thinking you're going to have a bright future ahead of you, you would have had a hard.
Oh, I feel like even in 2021, because like sometimes I'm like, oh, it's like hard to like get into paid work. It's hard to like,
Yes.
get like those progress spots. Because again, loads of people are in that level, which I understand. But I'm like, oh, this looks like it's a flourishing industry. And I'm like, I am such a fool.
I don't think you are a fool.
That's true as well.
I think it is a flourishing industry.
I also, but I'm in the perspective of at the time, and I was like, why am I seeing this as, because everyone was like, oh, clubs are closing down, like comedy nights are getting canceled.
But you know what? I think that's more of a function, I have to say. And to be fair, I am an outsider in this city. I've been here for 2 years. I've navigated a little bit of the comedy scene, enough to understand how it functions. And I don't know what it was like before, because I came to the UK more or less when you started.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, where are we now? It's like 2022.
25.
Yeah.
Okay.
And what's interesting, and I said this to somebody the other night, is that I remember going into a comedy club, right? It was full. And I remember saying, wow, it's so nice. What a great night. It's like a Saturday night full club. I was in South Africa. I had never seen this kind of thing before. And he says to me, he goes, yeah, it's just not as full as we're still not getting it back to how full it used to be, right? And I remember thinking, like, what is he talking about, this man? This is I've got eyes. I'm using my eyes, and what my eyes can see is a full club.
Yeah.
And then one night I came back, and it was packed. And I realized that the full that I had seen was how they structured the club to only have a certain amount of seats. When the club was full, there were maybe 40, 50 extra people in there. And that's what they were accustomed to. But for me, I'm accustomed to places that are like, have no people. So it really depends on your perspective. Like for me, coming from South Africa, where there was virtually no industry, to come here, you're the weakest version of the UK comedy scene. It far outshines the South African comedy scene. And that's not a diss to South Africa. We're like, South Africa does as well as it can, but it's like the difference, it's like the difference between a small town and the big city. It's like London is one of the, meccas of comedy in the world. And so what people here expect it to be, and if you listen to them and the people who have been here for 10, 20 years, and they're comparing it to the golden day when they were coming up and there was no competition in 1,000 clubs, because there was some time in this industry where, few comedians, an industry starts like that. Few comedians, not that many places to do comedy. Then there's this golden period. Much more comedy clubs, not that many comedians. wow, what a golden time. No competition, right? And that golden time is what allowed a lot of successful comedians to come up to buy homes, to put their kids through school. And once that golden period was over, you have lots of clubs, but also lots and lots and lots of comedians, right? Especially coming from all over the world to try and compete here. But I think people don't realize that this is still a thriving industry, and that it's also to do with this with this economy. People have money. You cannot convince me otherwise. They have money to spend on entertainment. And I guess it's because I come from a place where people don't have that much money to spend on entertainment that I still think this is a good place to be. But I guess if you've been here for 10 years, maybe for you, it seems like it's bad.
No, I think just to contextualize what I was about to say. I felt like, that was it was something that I thought about at the time, and you were like, "Oh, would have been a bit silly then to," because you almost think like, "Oh, there is a decline," because like again the lockdown is just happened,
Yes.
and again I remember doing my first show, and then a week later I got like this buzz because I thought, oh, it went really well, and then I
Yes.
want to do it again, and then the government enforced this second lockdown. So then like I remember 2 gigs, and then he goes like, oh well, actually that's not gonna happen because now we're in lockdown again until after Christmas, stuff like that. But no, I to your point, I very again I agree, because I feel like, and also there are different, I feel like now we're in a transition where it's a different way of even like taking your entertainment, you see, because again we're going from this traditional, and it's also like I feel like historically felt like a very linear sort of thing where which again, like it's crazy to think that like for example, so we can use social media to progress, or like to again not necessarily progress, but in the respects of like getting people to see you, while back in the day, I guess it was this case of like, oh, you've got to be funny, and then you've got to say you go to Edinburgh Fringe, and then if you're lucky, an agent or like spots
and
you,
then if you're lucky, you get on a talk show, on one of the panel shows, and then if you're lucky, you get an agent, and that agent will so the agent gets you the panel shows, and the agent gets you on Apollo, and then the agent books you a tour, and then you go on tour, then your second showing at Edinburgh is a huge success, then you go to the festivals, you then eventually you come back, you do more touring, then you start doing an international tour, then you get on, you go on Netflix, you get your Netflix special, and then you're famous.
so you see, this is it, and then
you're best friends with Lady Gaga.
And I would love to be honest. I wouldn't say no. I think she seems like a lovely lady, but yeah, you see, this is it, because like you kind of like, yeah, you got to do all these things, and then now it's almost like you get people, which again, for better or worse, you get, I see like people who are doing very well on say like sketch comedy on social media, and then I was fooled, to buy a ticket to their stand up show, and I was like, this is some of the worst stuff I've ever seen, but you see, again, it proves that there are, like, for example, again, I've seen, and I spoke with a friend of mine yesterday about how, like, there are comedians who didn't even have to go on doing clubs because they just, like, do their own shows.
Yes.
Because they have an audience that will just come and watch them, whatever, know, they do the show. And this is the kind of stuff where it's like the boundaries are getting redefined. And you kind of, and my dad had this saying, which I take to heart. It's something that, you can't piss against the wind.
Yes.
And because this is how I felt about social media, because I always feel like, oh, like social media.
Say it in Romanian.
Nu te poți pișa împotriva vântului.
I like that.
Thank you. But yeah, because the idea is like, and I was the same thing where I was like, oh, like social media comedy is a hack thing, like you should be good and that's it. And then I'm like, no, again, I still have opposing views. I'm still like, what, I sometimes feel, hey, I don't think it's fair.
Yeah.
But you have a choice. You can fight a system that's way bigger, and it's not even this thing. It's not even a fight, because like you can be like, oh, I don't agree with this, and
I have to say, I take a different approach. Like, I don't really believe in fair. When it comes to when it comes to anything outside, like the social, how do I put this? Like the things you're entitled to, health, safety, blah, blah, blah. There, I believe in fair. But when it comes to, I don't know, making a living based on your art, I don't believe in fair. Ethical, sure, but fair, who cares? Like, there's not like some someone keeping score of how we're getting to where we're getting. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like there's no one to answer to in the end
Yeah.
for what journey we take. The person who does amazing sketches and then does a terrible stand-up show will learn. It's like a self-correcting system, you know.
Yeah.
You'll go on your stage, you will do the worst stand-up you've ever done. You will feel so humiliated. You won't do another show unless you're good and you'll learn. Or you won't. You'll keep putting on delusional shows. And what does that do? Some people like to say that, oh, but that affects the way people view stand-up. And that might be true. But also, if you go to watch a stand-up show, let's say your first time, okay, and you watch a little stand-up show that's in your neighborhood or something like that, it's an open mic night, and that night, everyone on the bill is bad, including the headliner who they got to make sure the show was good. But that headliner decided to do new material that night because he didn't care about the gig. And your first time you're seeing stand-up are guys who are working really hard, but we're all bad. Believe me, you will never see another stand-up show in your life. So it's not just, you know what I mean? It's like thing can taint the impression of the thing. So I think like, do whatever you have to do to do the work you want to do, you know? Maybe that person will find out they don't like stand-up. Maybe that person will do the sketches, have an audience that comes to see them time and time again. Maybe they'll still like them, even though I think they're terrible. There's a lot of people like that, you know?
Yeah.
Do sketches. I don't understand. I don't know why this is funny. I send it to my friend. I'm like, why? Can you explain this to me? I don't understand. That person is succeeding and making a living and killing it out there and fine. And you know what? Doesn't affect me.
Yeah.
It's like, it's not like, and for all of our sakes, it's not an academy, you know, where like the person is cheating by doing their things and then they get more benefits that we cannot have. They're not taking there aren't limited resources that are being taken away from us. As we've discovered that in the viewing landscape and in the entertainment landscape, it's so broken up into so many, it's so incredibly segmented that it almost doesn't matter. It's endless. Sometimes I wonder, you know, like I see on Instagram, I go like, Kim Kardashian, let's say she's got 100 million followers or whatever. I don't know what even the numbers are, right? And then I go like, I see somebody else entirely that I have never heard of. Sometimes I'll come across a person on Instagram that I've never heard of and they've got 20 million followers. And I'm like, are these the same 20 million as the other 100 million? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
How many millions are out there that are available to everybody? Do you know what I mean? It's like, yeah. So that's just my thing about it. I think it's for good, for the sake of all of us, that fairness doesn't matter, that you can also go and get your part of it, whatever it is you think. And it's, you know, part of the pie. There's no pie, basically.
Yeah, no, again, it makes sense because, thinking about it, there is no such a thing as a tally system.
No.
No, you don't.
No.
You can't count points. It almost feels like, I don't know if you watch the US office.
Yes.
There is the bit where, you know, Michael is trying to find out who's gonna take charge, and then he's trying to like tally them up.
I don't remember.
And then he goes like, "Oh, well, can you tell me like who's got what?" And then he goes, "Oh, Dwight has got a star, but then you gave 100 points to Stanley, and Joe has got a rainbow flag or whatever." And then I'm like, "Yeah, that's kind of how it works." Because again, this is the thing: there is no clear. It's almost like it's not like the Olympics, you know?
No, there are exact, precise, measurable goals that you have to beat.
Yeah,
if you can beat those measurable goals, then you win.
Exactly.
And you get a medal.
So actually, you know what? That's a very good way of saying
it's freestyle.
Yeah, as long as like I said.
Like, I think like because we no longer have a system where if you have a big break, you are an instant success. Better that it's an open market.
Yeah.
That we can all learn how to navigate. And if you can't learn, the only thing that prevents you from succeeding is not being willing to learn the market.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And I would say, like, if you, especially as a young comedian, don't get locked into a previous generation's, battles, mentalities, beefs, visions, ideas of what success looks like, paths to success. Like, the world is a different world right now. One of the people I love listening to in stand-up is Roy Wood Jr.,
Okay.
Because anytime I ever hear a podcast or interview with him, I listen to it. There's always something so valuable in them. And he talks about how when he was coming up, It took him a long time to realize that he was trying to achieve the dreams of his predecessors. You know, get a sitcom.
Right.
When he was coming up, that his predecessors, the way they succeeded was they got a sitcom.
Yeah.
He realized that he was coming up in an era where that was no longer relevant. Or get on the late night, get a spot on late night,
Yeah.
a talk show spot on late night. That was his dream. And then when he got it, it's like it didn't necessarily make him blow up or do anything because we were living in a different world. And he didn't realize like, oh, those are the dreams of my predecessors. So maybe the dreams of my predecessors are like a Netflix special.
Yeah.
And, haven't yet realized, I have realized that a Netflix special is not a path to some kind of like international domination. Do you know what I mean?
That's a very good, yeah, I get it.
You have to be like, where are we now? What is the time? And the people, by the way, in my view, the people who understand where they are in a time, in an era, and how they exist in that era are the people who succeed. That's the people who are almost slightly ahead of their time, and they can see. That's why you get these YouTube stars who could see 10 years ago, this is the thing that we have to do to succeed, not try to do the thing that's already been done and is no longer working.
That's beautiful. No, generally, I'm like, there is so much. It's true, because I thinking about it, I'm like, because you're like, oh my god, I want to be on Netflix, I want to do these things, like I want to have my own movie or TV show, whatever.
Yes.
And then you're like, hang on a minute, this is. Again, this is almost like how you counted success 10, 15, 20 years ago, even 5 years ago. But the problem is that I feel like the speed with which we're going at this time and moment,
yes,
it's crazy because like you get people who went viral, for example, like last year, and now it's like, oh, okay, now how do you keep the moment? Or like you were and I think, if I may say, what you've done was like amazing and like very clever, where you were like, hey, okay, I've got this like Netflix, coming up. What am I going to do right now to, make the most out of it? Because, you're right. Like, okay, say the fact that you have a special on Netflix, it doesn't matter if you're going like 5 years later. Oh, by the way, guys, can I get I'm coming to LA.
Yes.
I'd like to do the club. And you're like, oh, can we see? Like, when did you do it? 5 years ago. I was like, well,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
You got to do it right now.
Care that I had done it just now, I can tell you just,
yeah.
The first big opportunity I got in stand-up was to be part of a show that Trevor Noah produced, right? It was called Nation Wild. It's a tour that he did a few times before that, but this time he was shooting it for television. He came back to South Africa. He chose 12 or 13 new comics to do a showcase with and film it and put it on our local broadcaster.
Right.
It was a massive opportunity. I'd only been doing stand-up for 3 years at that time. I'd never done anything this big. And I really did think it was like a massive opportunity, like to connect with Trevor on that level, but also to have that on screen, to have that calling card.
Yeah.
And afterwards, I realized, this no one's going to see this. It's on a local broadcaster. It has very little value outside of the experience itself.
Yeah.
And outside of telling myself that I was good at this,
Yeah.
So by the time the Netflix thing came along, I understood what its currency was. I remember thinking like, okay, apply your mind here. Look at everybody else around you who has gotten similar opportunities. Are they suddenly propelled into stardom? No. And if you pay attention, instead of paying attention to your jealousies and your, like, if I think about all the jealousies I had, oh, this one got this one got that, but watch all of the outcomes of the things you were jealous of. What did that get anybody? And I'm not saying they don't. They do. They do in each person's life. Each one of those things progresses you in some way, even if it's personally. But it's like you have to tally those things after a while and be like, oh, what does that actually lead to? And if I get an opportunity like that, what would I do with it? It's not a be all and an end all. No one opportunity these days leads to some massive outcome, positive or negative. Some loss. You lost out on some competition or whatever. It's not the end of your career, not even close. You got some massive opportunity. That's also not the end of your career, or the beginning, if you know what I'm saying. So I'm maybe, sometimes I'm too realistic, but I have learned that you also cannot like copy other people's careers. I tried. I was like, man, I'm just going to follow. I'm going to get all this information from people. If I have enough information,
Yeah.
then I'm going to put all that information together and I'm going to do everything those people did and I'm going to succeed. You know, it seems like a logical plan. But you don't even realize how individual each journey is. Oh, one person did this and then got that. One person got that. Okay, if I get this, then I get that. Oh, I can't get this because I can't go to fucking America because I don't have a visa. Do you know what I mean? Like some things are as simple as like, oh, I could be in London and start tackling the London comedy scene. Why? Because I had a friend who had a room for me. Do you know what I mean? So I can live there for 2 months and not pay rent.
Yeah.
Huge opportunity. You don't even realize that's a bigger opportunity sometimes than a Netflix special is the 2 months you don't have to pay rent in a city.
Yeah.
But you don't realize, you don't see that as an opportunity.
Especially this city.
But you know what I mean? You come from South Africa, the exchange rate is impossible to overcome. And so a free bedroom is a gift from the heavens. You go for 2 months, you can be like, this gig, that gig, this gig. Oh, that's progress how? Okay, fucking London doesn't give a shit about you. You can do 20 gigs and walk off the face of the earth and no one will ever remember your name. But, in those 20 gigs, I figured out I can do this. I can stand shoulder to shoulder with UK comics as a South African comic and actually be like, oh, okay, I can hold my own in this space. That's all the confidence I need to take me to the next step, which is who knows what.
Very nice.
Anyway, it's all I think like you have to know what path you're on, you know, not look left or right too much, not absorb too much negativity from people. It's very important to like learn how to feed your ambition with healthy things, you know.
This is a very, by the way, we've recorded for almost an hour and a half.
Oh, shit.
But this is a very beautiful way to end the episode. However, I wanted to ask you one thing. Actually, it will be two things. But then, the last podcast, or like interview-wise question is, because you were talking about when you were you envision yourself as being like an international comic.
Yes.
Is there a country that you've done or that you are now considering to do, which if you were to look back at yourself when you first started doing comedy, you would have not actually think that you would go there for stand-up? Because you're talking about like Switzerland, for example. You're talking about like Germany. Have you been to Romania?
No. What do you mean? Sorry.
So I'm sorry because I feel like it's. I'm asking in a very. I'm sure there is a much easier way.
That's okay. We'll get there.
Asking, yeah. So basically, the question was like, say, for example, there is a country that where you've done comedy, or where you're now, say, in the talks of going to do comedy, but then 10, like 10, 15, 20 years ago, you would have never see yourself going to that country. Because, for example, like Switzerland, to me,
yes,
I'm like, I wouldn't think.
No, most of the countries I go to, I would not have thought I would go to.
Right.
Most of them. The UK makes sense. America makes sense, right? Everywhere else didn't even cross my mind. Switzerland, Austria, Germany, Latvia, Lithuania, Portugal, Spain, Norway, Denmark, Sweden. Why would I even think of all those places? Never.
Yeah, okay. You see that's what I meant basically, because it's like you said, because you'd think again, I think even Australia, like any
Australia,
any big country,
Canada,
like speaking English speaking, like first language being English, you're like, makes sense. But then, like you said,
everywhere else, forget about it.
Like,
but then again, like you have to remember, I started in South Africa, which doesn't make sense either. But to be fair, we are a first language English speaking country.
But then, I was going to say, because then, but this is the thing, like, because you were talking about like Latvia and Lithuania, and you're like,
yes.
Did you reach out to like people who were like, oh, I'd like to put
No, I went to those places initially on that tour that I told you about.
Oh yeah, of course, yes.
And I have to say, I was told by the guy that I was touring with, he said to me, Gilli, we went to Klaipėda in Lithuania, and he said to me, Gilli, Klaipėda is the hardest room on the tour. If you can make these people laugh, you're a fucking rock star. And I just barely managed to make them laugh. It was close to impossible. But I'll tell you this. Now, when I was doing my own show and I've gone to lots of places.
Yeah.
I not long ago went to Riga, and it was the worst show I've ever had. And I'll tell you, I will not go back.
Fair enough.
And you know what? I find it very strange because I have so many Latvians coming to my shows everywhere else in the world, and they are such great audience members. They always have a great time. In fact, the biggest majority of audience members that I have that keep coming to shows are Eastern Europeans, Russians, Latvians, Lithuanians, Romanians, Ukrainians. And they always come to the shows and they have such a good time. They always bring back their friends. They always come up to me after the show to tell me where they're from and that they love the show. And then I thought like, okay, I'll go there.
Yeah.
I will come to the people. Man, the people were like, no, please don't come to the people.
This is quite funny. Because it's almost like you're expecting.
Like, you're ungrateful. I'm leaving. You come see me when you want.
I'm done. Next time, London.
Yes.
But okay, well, the last question is, what is it, whether you've got anything coming up that you'd like to mention, and also where do people find you on social video most active?
Instagram most active. Just, I guess, type in my name. Handle is Gilog, but type in my name. And where else? That's my most active one.
Perfect.
My coming up, yes, lots of things. I'm in Belgium this week. Do you know what? Come to my show in Oslo. That is the least selling show at the moment. 15th of March in Oslo. So if you know people, come. Send them to my show in Oslo. But yeah, lots of cities. Belgium, Austria, Switzerland. I'm trying to think. Spain, Portugal. That's what's coming up. So gilliapter.com for tickets and for dates. Yeah, that's it.
Very nice. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Have a good have a good day. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Well, I checked, and we do have a couple of listeners in Belgium. And look, if you happen to listen to this episode on time, make sure you check out Gilli's show. If not, you know what, follow her, because I'm sure she's gonna be back, because she's super funny. And look, it was such a pleasure speaking with her. And thank you all for listening. And I think that's pretty much it from me. You know, I want to keep it fairly brief. And I guess from me, Pickle and Sarma, until next week, stay skillful. Goodbye.